in Alabama, and we're talking to Scott Miller. The 10 a.m. series tries to bring together different people from the art world, artists, collectors, other dealers, journalists, critics, museum people. I really want to kind of depict the entire industry, and we also have open calls. The next one is sometimes, I think again next Friday afternoon. I think these open calls were surprisingly amazing. The quality is so high out there. And now let's see if we find Scott Miller, who is, here we are, that was quick. It's 10 a.m. Hi, Scott.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good. It's afternoon in Berlin and it's 10 a.m. with you in Alabama.
Yes, a bit early. We just had bad tornadoes all night last night.
Oh no, on top of Corona.
Yeah, so it really took, I think Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana took a big hit last night.
Oh, and
We
you're all
fared a
right?
little better.
But you're all right?
Oh, yeah. We fared a little bit better for some reason. We sort of dodged a bullet a bit.
What was the impact on it? What happened?
I think multiple deaths in Mississippi and buildings torn up and all kind of things. I guess it's an unfortunate thing that we have down here, right? We have to sort of deal with that kind of thing this time of year.
How often is that happening?
Pretty frequently. I mean, once every month we probably have to worry about tornadoes coming through. Yeah, because our weather fluctuates. During one night it could be 40 degrees and then the next day it could be 82, right? And that fluctuation is what I think causes a lot of that stuff.
Did you think the climate change, did it increase the number of tornadoes?
That's a great question. I'm not sure about. That I don't know. Yeah.
So Scott, tell us a bit about your collective practice.
Yeah, totally. First, I want to thank you for working so tirelessly to keep everybody up to date and informed and give us content to check out. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging. I think it's very important to be in dialogue and to, it's also interesting for myself how much I learn, how much I learn from my own artist. I discovered this one artist today. Before I started this live chat with you, I was researching this young British artist. So it's really interesting to replace this experience of the physical art work with alternatives. And maybe I'm kind of quick in this because I had an accident when I was a child and had to compensate my visual loss. So that's why maybe I'm like so jumping on like alternatives in compensating the usual exchange,
Yeah, totally. And I think that, the art is what we all love, right? And that's what we get to live with every day. But ultimately, it's about these kinds of relationships, right? That you can build and grow on that really make it really worthwhile, whether it's the artist or other collectors, dealers, museum curators, all of that, right? That's what sort of adds to, to make it even more special, right?
Yeah, and I think we always need a new fix, we kind of like all art junkies who need like,
yeah, right. Yeah, totally. It never stops, right? It never stops. So I'll give you just a little snippet of sort of my background. So I was born and raised here in Birmingham and grew up knowing that I had an interest in art, quickly realizing that I wasn't a very good painter or artist. So I sort of took the graphic design route, and I have my own business here, a marketing firm, and we do branding, and I've done catalogs for museums here and things like that. I started collecting when I was probably almost 30 years ago. When I was in junior high and high school, I started really looking closely at art. I didn't grow up in a family of art lovers, so I'm not really sure where that came from. So I started initially collecting works by my professors while I was in school. So I went to the University of Alabama for undergrad. Then I went on to attend the graduate.
How did that go? So you approached a professor and to acquire the work, or
well, interestingly,
had
that
influences on your grades?
Yeah, so that actually came after I graduated, but I became friends with quite a few of the professors, and one in particular that sort of became my mentor, and taught me quite a bit about the art world, and we sat and talked about painting, hours upon hours, and so after that I attended the graduate program in visual communications at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth. And then when I came back to Birmingham, a friend of mine said, you know what, you need to join our collector circle group at the Birmingham Museum. And we have a new curator that just came to town, wanted you to meet him. So his name was David Mose, who went on to be the contemporary curator at the AGO in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And David and I became very close. And he sort of introduced me to a world of art that I never really had access to, right? So we in the collector circle would travel around and do visits to New York and LA and Miami and 20 years ago. And so after David left, as our museums have been sort of in between curators, I have helped them sort of put on trips and going to different cities and bringing collectors and bringing students. I did trips with our UAB art students to Houston and to New Orleans for Prospect and things like that. And then in about 2008 through 12, those years were pretty bad for most people. So I took a little bit of a hiatus from the art world and collecting. And
so you were kind of suffering from the crisis, yeah?
Yeah, it was terrible, right? So small business, marketing, first thing to be cut, first thing to go. And so I sort of took a little bit of a backseat. It's always been in my blood. So I'm always looking constantly, always online. And then about 6 years ago, I met my significant other, and she had never been involved in the art world. An interesting story, right? So she said, why don't we start acquiring some things again? So we started buying together. Then Tina took a little bit different route. She decided to go back to school, and now she's the assistant curator at one of our museums here in town at UAB, at AVA at UAB.
Wow. Yeah, it's a funny development.
Yeah.
So what did you buy?
Okay, so you want to take a look at some things?
Yeah, let's show.
Okay,
let's show.
Let's do. So we'll just go on inside.
I mean,
here.
I find it interesting. The US is so extreme, right? When it went down with businesses, it goes like deep down, right? But then it recovers relatively quickly, right?
It does, and I think that I don't know, man. Those years were pretty tough for a lot of people, right? A lot of layoffs, a lot of small businesses were hit. Obviously, the real estate market was terrible. I mean, there were neighborhoods.
Oh yeah, Miami, I remember. There's this great documentary on it also. It's because I looked at my old, because we went through that crisis also. And I was kind of surprised how well we came through it. I mean, we had to really be cost sensitive. I mean, the gallery was also not that big as it is today, but it was looking back, it was not as bad, but also Germany, I think it's not really comparable. Anyway, let's get distracted by some visuals now.
Okay, so we'll swap it around a little bit, and I'll take you through. I'll kind of step back a bit. So this is a work by Will Boone.
Yes,
you're familiar with Will's work.
Yeah.
So this is part of his sigil series, right, where he creates layers of text works. So when Tina and I started collecting together again, it was a little bit different than I did the last time, right? So the last time in the earlier years of my collecting, it was about sort of more, and who was the next thing and the young artist. And so when we started collecting again, or when I started with Tina again, we sort of wanted to have a little bit more focused on a direction, right? So a lot of the work that you'll see is text-based works, color field works, minimal, things like that. I think I was actually born probably 60 years late, right? When it comes to my love for the things in terms of art history that I really, truly love, abstract expressionism,
Can you go a bit closer to the Wilbun?
Yep. So this is interesting, right? So this is called Upside Down TX, which is really nice. So you can see the texture in Will's work.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think this work has a bit of a religious connotation, right? Because the cross being upside down, which is kind of interesting. But Will is actually from Texas. We just went to see his exhibition at CAM in Houston and got to know Will on a personal level. Super great guy. And this, I think, is a bit of a self-portrait in a way, him being from Texas. But it kind of fits with our aesthetic in terms of my graphic design background, my love for typography, and also fits in terms of the other text-based works that we have. So I'll kind of take you down this wall here, and we'll kind of move around a bit. So
great, they go well together, the three of these here. Interesting.
Yeah, so nice, right?
How,
so like,
how goes this to this and then becomes this like round shape?
Yeah, they work really nice together. So this is a work by Peter Halley.
Yeah.
When we sort of commit to an artist, we try and really commit to their full practice, right? So whether it's painting or works on paper or even prints, even edition works, there's a level of love that we have for those works as well, because it really shows those, the artist's hand in even in printmaking, right? So for artists like Wyatt Kahn and folks like that, you can really see in Peter's work, which I'll show you here in a minute, so we have multiple works by Peter, works on paper, painting. So this is one work by Peter. I'll kind of get close where people can kind of see.
Yeah, because not everybody knows the stucco, I guess, huh?
Right, in terms of the textures and things like that.
Yeah.
So this was a work that we actually commissioned.
Really?
We actually, we're a little bit different maybe than a lot of other collectors, right? So relatively from a financial standpoint, we have to work very closely with galleries, and we're a bit of the underdog here, right, in Alabama, because we're not in New York all the time, we're not in LA all the time. We travel to fairs, but we just don't have that sort of same ability to be in front of dealers all the time and be in their galleries and talking with them. So we have to really work hard to build these relationships, right, over a long period of time, and for dealers to really kind of begin to understand where our collection is heading and the artists that we're interested in, things like that.
Can you tell me what was the commission? Because it was a size? You had this specific size?
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, okay,
so the larger paintings, we would have loved to have added to the collection, and we hope one day to be able to do that. But Peter was generous, and we worked with him directly, and Carol Green, which we've built a relationship with over the last few years. And Peter was willing to do a painting for us this size, and we just fell in love with it. He, gave us a sketch of what it would look like, and it turned out, we think, beautifully.
Very nice. Can you tell me the dates of these 4 paintings we are looking at right now?
Oh, wow. Great question. So,
or more or less?
Maybe 2015. This is a rather new 17, maybe for the Halley, 17, 18. Paul Cramer is another Houston-based artist. I don't know if you know Paul's work.
No.
So this is around, I'm guessing, around the same time, 15, 14. So Paul Cramer is a Houston-based artist. We met Paul a few years ago. We have collected Paul's work in depth, probably 5 or 6 paintings. We'll look at some more upstairs. And this is called Pink Pool, right? So Paul comes out of that sort of hard edge, geometric. This is kind of next generation Ellsworth Kelly, right? So you look at one thing and it sort of becomes something kind of different. So as you look at this, you may kind of look at it as a motorcycle helmet or a racing helmet or something like that. But then when you hear what the title is, pink pool, you realize that it's actually a swimming pool with a diving board, right? Looking down.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Can you go a bit closer to see? Is it very gestural?
Yeah, totally.
Is it like?
It's actually not. It's very flat on linen.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So very
nice. So it's
nice.
like kind of a graphical typo also a bit.
Exactly. And Paul actually started as a graphic designer, right? So we had that connection. You know, he was doing websites for people like Lou Reed and things like that. And
almost Paul like a logo, right? It's almost like a.
Yeah, it is kind of. Yeah. And Paul is very close. You know, there's a interesting thing going on, right, in Houston in terms of the art community there, right? So there are others like Mark Flood, and I think Justin Adian was originally from there. Will Boone originally from there, right? So there's this special moment happening. And, you know, Mark actually, you know, we've gotten to know Mark over the years. He just had a beautiful exhibition that we got to see at Karma. I don't know if you saw the images of that.
I saw.
And so, so we've got to know Mark real well. You know, he takes on kind of this, you know, father figure to these young artists in Houston. And anyway, so the history goes back with Paul and Mark and those kind of folks, and that, which is kind of a nice segue into, this is a text-based work by Mark. We love Mark's works in terms of his lace paintings and some of his earlier collages and things like that. But of course, really what sort of fits into our collection is the text-based works. And so this is Find Your Soul Mat, interesting kind of play on words. And, you know, Mark, what's interesting about Mark, you know, he's been doing it since the 70s. He's been doing it for a long time, right? So I think there's an interesting place where Mark belongs in, you know, in sort of that historical context. So these works, I have always had a love for Warhol, right? So, and never will be able to afford a Warhol, right? But these works are Purple and Red Electric Chair by an artist that lives in New York named Charles Lutz. They are sort of conceptual works. They are called Warhol Denied, where he did a body of work which he showed at the Warhol Museum, where he recreated these Warhol paintings. He sent them to the Warhol Authentication Board to have them stamped as fakes. And it's more of a conceptual work.
Okay. And they got stamped fake?
They did, yeah. So they're actually
because they stopped that a couple of years ago, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah, totally. So I'll just kind of, so this is a large work. It's about 2 stories tall by David Ostrovsky. Yep. So this is an artist that we've been following for a very long time. David's work fits nicely into the collection.
Is this an earlier work?
I think this was maybe 2015 also.
Interesting. It looks a bit like almost like an installation, you know, like a replication of a gallery space with a element on the bottom, you know, like as if it's like a wood floor.
Oh, it does actually. Yeah. And so I'll get a little bit closer and you can kind of see, right? So there's all these beautiful imperfections, right, in the work and collage elements that he adds, right? So it's a rather large painting, maybe 90 inches or so. So yeah, we have our art books that this is kind of my favorite reading spot. We have books that we collect by artists. This is a Colum Innes painting on one of his catalogs. So this is a Mark Flood piece, The Flags, Ostrovsky book. So that's kind of fun. We collect artist books that they paint on for us, or that we are able to acquire. So we'll just kind of go up the stairs here. So this is another work by Paul Cramer, the Houston-based artist.
Yeah. Right? What's the title here? It seems like the titles have a big...
Oh, I knew you. I should have been prepared. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I sometimes forget the names of the people on my wall.
You know, I've been doing it for so long, right? It's kind of, you know, it's tough to keep up with every single artist, but I try to do my best, and I'm getting old, man. I've just turned 50, and it's getting harder and harder to remember things. So this is large Eddie Martinez painting. This is another work by Paul Cramer. You can kind of see, right, as you get closer, the sort of lines.
Can we see the Eddie Martinez again?
Oh, yeah, totally. So this is called Joker. And it's interesting, right? So from a graphic design standpoint, when Eddie, drawing is such a big part of his practice, right? So I'll take you a little bit closer so you can kind of see how Eddie takes those small drawings and enlarges them and blows them up. And then you can kind of see where he's incorporated spray paints and oil paints, and the layering is, you can see the drips, right, in some of the paint, which is really nice. And then also the imperfections where, he throws them around the studio and, there are footprints and things like that. But we're big fans of Eddie's work.
You have a ceramic as well?
We do not have one of the sculptural works, but would have loved to, actually.
They're super,
So this is Malika Kara. Shows at Perez.
I have a paintings of her as well.
Yeah, so we have two works by Malika. We have two early works. They're really sort of rough and raw, and there's just something that we have sort of fallen in love with these sort of earlier works by Malika. This is a Canadian artist named Beth Latane, or Beth Latane, however we say Latane here in the South, but she's French Canadian. I guess she's French Canadian. She's from Canada, so this is one of her color sort of, where I kind of think of them as color field works, but you can kind of see up close. They have this sort of beautiful wash to them that she's able to create.
And tell me, all these works you acquired with your partner together? Or is this more your chapter, which is very graphic design driven, surfaces?
Right. So there are some works in the collection still that, and I'll kind of show you a few more that were earlier on when I was buying earlier on. But the majority of this is what Tina and I have sort of done over the years. Yep. So we'll just take a...
And how here there I'm kind of looking already a little bit at questions, and it says, like, for example, do you know you want a work instantly, or does it take time?
That's a great question too. So I've been doing this for a while now, and so I'm looking constantly, and I research artists' background. It's not, for me, it's not something that I sort of pull the trigger on immediately. It is something that I really, want to get to know the practice in its entirety, right? And so that takes a little bit of time to do that. However, in some cases, if we're talking about a young artist that becomes, I don't like the word hot, but, it puts a little bit of we're at a bit of a disadvantage, right? Because there are other, quote unquote, probably more important collections and collectors that, dealers may offer works to. So, but it takes me a while, and Tina and I really look thoroughly at, a large body of work. We try to visit the artists when we can, get to know them a bit. And then when the right work comes up, because, David once told me, and some other people that I really admire in terms of collecting, and that is, David Mose, the curator and so you really want to try and get the best work that you can by the artist and the piece that you can afford to get, right? Not just settle for a work just because you think that you don't, right, big names, and you may miss out, or, right? And so these are the kind of things that we think about when we're inquiring, right? So
what is this on this beautiful? It's a maquette for the Peter Helley. What is this? Right?
It is.
That's
right.
a sketch. And what is it to the? Is this a Graupner to the right?
What's that?
Gotthard Graupner. Gotthard Graupner was it's an amazing artist. He did these pillows. He's like he was a teacher of Katharina Grosse. But he does these like frottage works. But what is this? The orange in the corner.
So this is also Beth's work, the one that I showed you with the large painting, the red painting. Right. Yeah. So these are watercolor works. By Beth, and you can kind of see the details on these as well. And this is one. And it's interesting too, right? So I want to talk a little bit just quickly. I know we got to move on, but so these works, Beth was in a show at Pace. I don't think that necessarily they picked her up, but they did an incredible
she's a
show
woman.
with her.
It's a woman.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we were able to acquire these works from Pace Gallery, right? So, galleries all over the world are willing to work with collectors and talk with collectors. And, no matter how big or small the gallery is, it's always fun to, to build those, kind of relationships.
100%.
So this was another work on paper by Eddie, which you can kind of see up close, right? So it has all of the beautiful sketches and the drawings and the illustrative qualities to it, and also the painting.
Here, let me quickly show you Gotthard Graupner, because I have...
Oh, fabulous.
This is Katharina Grosse, but Graupner is like... This was a show on the two of them.
Nice.
And it's interesting. He has a very strong market in Germany. What's his name? He shows him, Carsten Greve, who showed Twombly and Louis Bourgeois.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, look at that.
And he does these pillows, they're like sculptural. And he was Katharina Grosse's professor and I actually kind of initiated this museum show. We don't represent the estate, unfortunately, but it's very interesting. The works sell for quite high prices on auction, but it's a very German phenomena. But you should look at it, because I think you will like it.
Totally.
They're beautiful. Like, you kind of like deep dive into them when you stand in front of them.
Excellent.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So.
All right. So we'll just kind of keep on going. So this is a beautiful little work on paper by Odile Donald Odetta, that does these really beautiful shows at Jack Shaman, does these beautiful, colorful paintings, but this is a sort of a single line, and you can kind of see the drip that comes down from the paper, which is very nice. And this is sort of a work on paper selection, right? So this is another work on paper by Will Boone called Home. This is a work by Jonathan Lasker. And I'll get a little bit closer so you guys can see that. Yep. So you can kind of see the grid, which is common in Lasker's work, and the beautiful ink washes. This is another work by Will. Another work on paper.
So it's really like you kind of focus the collection on a certain bunch, and then it's quite intensively on those.
Exactly, right? Intensively on those. And it takes us a little while to decide to add sort of newer works to the collection, right? But once we do, this is another painting by Malika. This is a large red one.
So have you visited Malika, for example, in the studio?
No, we have not, actually, unfortunately. I have not been. Does she work in Berlin?
I think she's from Cologne. I'm not sure, but I think she's from Cologne, yeah.
So we haven't made that trip, which we've got to do at some point. We try to do as much as we can, but that is one trip that I'm, very much wanting to do.
What is this here?
So these are also by the Texas-based artist Paul Cramer, right? So these are also two large paintings. I think one is called Prop Weight, the one on the left, and one is called Crevice, part of his Crevice series. Right? So it becomes very flat.
Very nice.
But then as you look at it closely, right, becomes something quite different.
The pool one is my favorite.
Oh, the pink pool? It's a great one, right?
Yeah, super.
So we won't show this one too long. There's a little bit harder work to live with. So I was acquiring Matthew Ronay's work for years and years before he was in the Whitney Biennial. Yeah. His work has evolved completely from this earlier body of works that he was doing. So this is one work here, right? And this is another sculptural work.
Wow, I don't know so much. I think it came across me, but I'm not so familiar with it. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so Matthew is a Yale graduate. If you look at the work now, I think he's with Casey Kaplan.
Can you get closer?
Yeah, totally. So this is a sculptural work out of wood, right? Where you can kind of see the body parts, obviously.
But it's a young artist.
Matthew is probably in his 40s, I'm guessing.
Okay.
And the work now looks totally different. Shows with Neil Stark also,
Mm-hmm. And the other one, can we go back to the other one?
Yeah, totally. Right, so these are also carved from wood. His work now is more abstract in nature, but you can still see sort of the body parts and things like that. So these, you can kind of see how they float off the wall in these clouds.
Okay.
But the work looks totally different and totally fantastic. Had recent shows at PAM, at Perez Art Museum in Miami. So Matthew is an artist, again, that I have been looking at for a very long time. Unfortunately, haven't been able to get a newer work, but just beautiful. So I'll talk a little bit. This is one of the paintings from my professor when I was at Alabama. I have held on to it for close to 30 years. And it is one that I have always loved and has sort of got me sort of started and interested in painting and collecting and things like that. So this work is by a Canadian artist also, and I'm going blank, sorry. But these works we have two of these works in the collection, and they are figurative works that are actually made from cardboard boxes, right?
But interesting, so you have a very formal aspect on one side and an extreme figurative on the other.
Right, exactly, yeah, totally. So this is a work by Casper Sohn. Yep, one of his burn paintings. So I'll take you downstairs and show you a couple more things. I don't want to bore everybody to death completely.
Oh, they don't need to. They can always leave.
So this is, these are interesting. These are, so when I talk about works on paper, right? So these are Matthew Ronay's works on paper and sketches for some of his sculptural works. So this is really nice because we have the drawing.
And did you acquire them as a whole suite as one, or step by step?
All step by step, yeah, totally.
I throw in some more questions. I'm seeing. I don't have them shown because I never can get rid of them, and we don't see then anything anymore on your screen. What's your advice for young collectors?
Oh wow, young collectors. So like I've sort of mentioned a little bit earlier, right? There is, a few people have always sort of told me. Let me swap this around here. Okay. So you always want to commit to work that is the best of the work that you can sort of acquire at the price point you are comfortable acquiring it, right? And there's, it doesn't matter whether you acquire work on paper or I was watching the great video by, I want to say Douglas Cramer, right, collector, who did Love Boat and all of that, right? He had this video on collecting, and he talked about that works on paper are like,
oh, I don't know. Can you send it to me and I share it with the audience?
Yeah, I can do that definitely a little bit. When I'll look it up online
afterwards.
And send it to you. Yeah. Cool. And so he talks about drawing and acquiring works on paper and it being a big part of his collection into understanding the artist's work and practice and all of that. So, whether it's getting a great work on paper or a great painting, and it doesn't always have to be the biggest painting, right? Or the largest one. I mean, you just want to make sure that you try and get the best work that you can get. And also to do a lot of research, right? And really kind of dig in because, there are a lot of artists that are artists of the moment it's interesting, right? So Tina and I were having this conversation the other day, right? So in terms of market, ironically, right? So the market seems to be interested in artists that are very, very young, just getting started, and interested in artists that are, being rediscovered. But there's this huge window, right? When artists are in their 30s and 40s and 50s, where it's also a good moment to be looking at some folks. Yeah.
I think who could be interesting for you from our program is Robert Janitz.
I watched his video. You did a talk with him as well, right?
Yeah, and we just before this, we had like a Zoom walkthrough here for like a bunch of clients of us, and we were walked through, and one of my salespeople talked about this work, and she almost sold it to me. She was so good at it.
Oh wow!
Because these are like it's typography, abstracted typography. I think it's an A and an E, and it refers to like youth culture. He's older, he studied Sanskrit and he went to he has a Buddhist background, and he's like in his 60s now or something, late 50s. He's with Canada in New York also, and so what he uses here is he uses how you call it, flour. He mixes the paint with flour, and so it's like abstract but representational, is that the right word, at the same time. And he's an interesting, because he's kind of like in between, as you just said, in between all these like in between like mid-career and young artist, and these regular categories the market tries to put people into.
I know, right? And I find it kind of interesting because there are so many great artists in that sort of range where I don't know what it is about the market and why they feel like, they've got to, really focus in on the emerging and early and right out of school, and they're the next great artist. And then not until they're in their 70s and 80s, right, where they look at them again or rediscover them. And, but there are so many great artists, right? Like, again, Peter Halley has sort of reemerged again a bit, right?
Yes.
When landing with Carol Green, right? And so,
and
even
so
Jonathan,
what's his name with White Cube now? This Neo Geo. He does these wood sculptures and geometric.
Chaim Steinbach.
No. But same generation. He's with White Cube now. He just has a show up now. He's Dutch American.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll have to go back and look.
It's interesting. There are always opportunities, and I think it's important to make your own. Find your own way, no?
Yeah, totally. Because I always find artists that we sort of gravitate to, right? That have their own visual language, and obviously that's my background. So that's a big part for me, right? To find these artists that have their own visual language, unique visual language. And so as a collector, I think it's, I don't know, just for me, right? It's not for everybody. There are collectors I know that are very interesting that have a wide variety and range of works. But for me, I just feel like I can't really learn about everything. So I really want to learn about the things that I'm most interested in and really, get into them in depth.
Yeah. Peter Schuif. Thank you, everybody. Peter Schuif. I'm so bad with names, but I'm talking about Peter Schuif. Thank you so much. This was amazing. Please send me this video so I can share it with everybody.
That sounds great.
Thanks for joining this conversation and letting us look into your house. Unfortunately, we didn't meet your partner this time. Hopefully next time.
Sorry. She's in there working. She's having to work from home from the museum, and they're getting some exhibitions and everything scheduled and ready and all of that.
What we should do? Maybe we should have her tour the collection again, and then we hear it from her perspective. That would be kind of interesting experiment.
It'd be fantastic. Yeah. And listen, man, thanks again for all that you do, because you're keeping everybody connected and giving us a lot of great stuff to watch while we are home. So
I also distract myself from, seeing the world go under in slow motion.
Well, hopefully we can meet in person one day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
See you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.